Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of my coverage of Unity of Command 2's Kursk DLC, or specifically the Citadel campaign, but first, as promised, I will discuss some of the innovations that will come with this DLC, and in terms of mechanics, it's most obviously and prominently going to be the specialist steps. You will notice that both the Red Army and the Germans will get a new and shiny golden Toad AT spec. In addition to fiddling with all of the attack and defense and armor parameters, we've changed one thing that we've never done. See, so far, all AT specs have held the second place in all of the steps in defense, which means that if a unit with an AT specialist gets attacked, that specialist is always the second that gets suppressed or destroyed. In practice, it usually means that if you want to disable an enemy AT specialist, you need to use 2 feint attacks. Well, it's not gonna be like that with the new golden AT specs. The Soviet one sits firmly at position 5, representing the in-depth anti-tank defense that the Red Army developed and perfected by the time of the Kursk battle. The acronym, by the way, means anti-tank or tank destroyer brigade, even though it's more of a tactical and operational doctrine rather than a particular unit. And once we introduced this, we thought, why not give the Germans a little bit of that nice thing as well? And so the 88mm Pak 43 spec gets position 3 in defense, also pretty neat. In addition to that, we introduced a lot of period-appropriate specialists like Su-152, 85, Panthers, and Hummels, as well as some of the types of specialists that the Red Army has lacked so far, like the Recons, represented by Mixed and Mobile Motorcycle Regiment, as well as Naval Infantry Special Forces and Golden Engineers in the form of Storm Sappers. I've also enjoyed seeing some of those Italian specs in Citadele, and the fact that you can combine them with German units, allowing this mixing and matching of Italian paratroopers and self-propelled guns with German tanks, for example. And finally, there are a couple of very unique specialists, like the Czechoslovak Brigade. There actually was a Czechoslovak unit hidden somewhere in Desert Rats, so that spec was on the cards since the very beginning of this DLC, and you will be able to find it around Kiev in both of the campaigns. Oh, and there is a period-appropriate, rare Soviet heavy tank spec somewhere in there, and I dare you to find it. Another item I'd like to discuss is the new Soviet infantry models. The original models had a bunch of problems, from wild inaccuracies to begin with, to the fact that they imitated early war or pre-war uniforms and did not mesh well with the period, and so we had to go in and research the whole thing and figure out all of the elements of the Soviet infantry uniform in 1943, resulting in these pretty neat summer and winter regular and guards infantry models. For various reasons, we had to make a few compromises in terms of realism. People have noticed that the rifle guys carry a Mauser and not a Mosin, or the fact that the summer guard soldier is wearing a camouflage tunic that never existed, but all of these adjustments were due to budgetary concerns and also visibility in play. In any case, I'm absolutely happy with the way the summer regular infantry has come out. This is easily one of the best and true-to-life representation of late-war Soviet infantry I have seen in any video game, and I hope you too will appreciate the new look on the battlefield. But I'm rambling too much. Let's return to Citadele and the alternative history part of it. And I must say, if you're looking for a classic experience playing as the Germans in this game, you're gonna find it in there. There is wonderful variety with very difficult terrain around Leningrad and in Karelia, and my absolute favorite, going into Italy and reliving some of that early war blitzkrieg glory. There is significant challenge in some of the later missions though, so if you're aiming to playing the alternative history scenarios, you better avoid significant losses in Citadel North and South. Oh, and before we get to the doodles, since I forgot to mention this in my previous video, all of the guides and playthroughs I show here are for maximum hard difficulty, and the only cards I ever use are those that I get in Battlefield. I never buy any. Let's watch. So, we'll start with Belomorsk, and this mission is one of those where 90% of success is correct preparations. What you do in the deployment round is critical, and the map here shows the final result. These locations of the supply hubs will make sure that the AI will not go for them or try to block them. I have set up pontoon bridges southwest and southeast of Segeja. Use different HQs to plop those pontoons because you will need some of those command points in Marselan HQ to transfer the recon spec you have to the cavalry. And obviously don't forget to move the Marselan HQ closer to that pontoon bridge. That's what I've found to be arguably the best prep out there. And let's start reviewing what you need to do in this mission, starting from the easiest to the hardest, from north to south. The troops you get at Kalevala will be the primary troops that will take Kem. Wait for turn 2, the Soviet unit that sits there will retreat from Kalevala and will be much easier to kill out in the open. Plot that SS infantry unit southeast of Kalevala, not elsewhere, and move quickly to take that truck source of supply. Use these two units to squeeze around any enemy barriers to ultimately block the railway from the north, and Kem is the perfect location to actually use your flying artillery in. You may also set up a supply hub somewhere around Kem if the supply situation gets too spicy. In the middle, do not engage that Soviet Union north of Rugozero. Cross the river with your elite infantry, and to the south, push your infantry into the marshes next to Tunguda and set up pontoon bridges there. On turn 2, clear out the defenders of Tunguda. You may use suppressive fire with that artillery specialist you get. Secure the supply source and move your infantry towards that railway leading to Belomorsk. Although I usually try to cover the flank in the area west of Belomorsk because the AI sometimes likes to send the tank there. Move that supply hub at Rogozero to the east of Tunguda as soon as possible, and obviously move that HQ. The south section is the trickiest one, but you can cross the river with your infantry to block enemy units at Medvezhegorsk, then send your cavalry that same way. Use recon in force to clear the zone of control of that naval infantry unit, move the cavalry to the river at Segeja, and build a pontoon bridge across the river at Segeja. The AI virtually always destroys the railway bridge there, and you really need to get in quickly. Finally, move that elite infantry across the other river as well. And on turn 2, your goal is to take Segeja, probably with your cavalry, to take the other hex touching the railway bridge and repair that bridge. And in my playthrough, I was actually able to push my elite infantry past Segeja towards the next railway bridge and prevent the enemy from blowing it up, which speeds up your subsequent advance considerably. In subsequent turns, obviously plop your German regiments at Segeja and don't rush to destroy the enemy units at Medvezhegorsk. It's possible to manage the supply by connecting with the Tunguda group and getting your supply from there, and once the Medvezhegorsk defenders are completely out of supply, you just clear the railway. With the central and south groups connected, your next task will be to build pontoon bridges leading to Sumski Posad. I recommend sending your best units there, preferably your cavalry division, because that objective is slightly less accessible than Belomorsk. But if you manage to take Belomorsk very quickly, and speed here is very much worth the losses, you will be able to take the town without the AI blowing up the bridges, enabling you easier access to Sumski Posad. Nordlicht is arguably the most difficult mission of the alternative parts of this campaign, and a big chunk of it has to do with defeating enemy infantry around Otsinovets and clearing your way between Schlisselburg and Volhov. For this reason, make sure that the infantry units touching Schlisselburg and Kolpino are provided with artillery and engineers, and that police mechanized division is given very strong specs as well. So on turn 1, use flying artillery on Schlisselburg and on the hex northwest of it, on the other side of the river, which must immediately be followed by an assault crossing. You really need to get that hex in your hands on turn 1. Then obviously use set-piece attacks and everything to clear out Schlisselburg and send your police mechanized division to help destroy some of the infantry units guarding the railway. In Kolpino, use suppressive fire to destroy the fort and then just kick out the enemy infantry. In subsequent turns in this part of the map, follow the rule of fastest units go first. Get those 9th Army tanks to Schlüsselburg and Włocław as quickly as possible. You're probably not going to be able to completely clear the railway, so prioritize Nowa Ladoga, and as you take it, try to take the hex above Włocław as early as possible, preferably on turn 3. Nowa Ladoga is a source of supply, so set up a hub there, and with all of your German mechanized troops in the area and some infantry, you should not have too much trouble dealing with Włocław. Do be active, pushing your infantry through Schlüsselburg. You have way too much of it defending the front in the south, so send your better ones, including that Mountaineer division, to Włocław, and start applying pressure on the Osinowiec-Leningrad area as well. I recommend bringing infantry equipped with artillery to Kolpino to start bombarding the other side of the river, and then removing its defenders and plopping a pontoon bridge to ease access to the other side of the river. Once you get a firm foothold in the area, start using your Finnish troops as well. I sadly did not give suppressive fire to that Kanaksen HQ, so I had to make do with feint attacks, but suppressive fire would absolutely help against those fortifications, and it's also a very good idea to take that hex south of Osinowiec as soon as possible because it's very defensible and an excellent place to launch your attacks on the town from. In the rest of the mission there, keep up the pressure, try to destroy as many enemy troops as possible, but keep one flying artillery left over just in case you might need to use it on Osinowiec or Tikhvin maybe. And around Włocław, turn 4 should not bring you too much difficulty if you brought enough tanks in the area. Use some of your troops to clear out Włocław and send your tanks to also help at Pashki Pervoz, which is a perfect time to discuss the Finnish troops in the east. The area between Pashki Pervoz and Podporozhye is pretty much the only place where you need to break through and do anything, so move all of your cavalry, all of your infantry, all of your mechanized troops from elsewhere into that little breach. Use the river crossing ability to cross the major river on turn 1, and on turn 2 attack Ladena Pole with the guys that had just crossed the river. If you have pontoon bridges, even better. And once Ladena Pole is yours, send in your fast troops across the bridge. You might push your tanks even towards Tikhvin. They may be helpful even though they're not going to be able to take it on their own. Use your infantry to prepare the frontal assault on Pashki Pervoz, but also send someone to outflank it through the marshes and the forest. You really need to surround that hex by the time you take it. And finally, once you start advancing to Tikhvin, the Soviets will get really strong mechanized and tank troop reinforcements. And on your initial advance, keep the difficult terrain, use rear guards. The enemy tanks will counterattack, and this is a very bad place to lose your top divisions. But once that obstacle is cleared, you can rush to Tikhvin and take it. I found the Return to Napoli mission to be this odd combination of really disastrously easy and sometimes incredibly annoying. But let's start with prep. Those two divisions in the middle of the map. Give your best heaviest artillery and your best tank to that tank, and make sure that the mechanized infantry division at least has a recon spec. Beef your SS tank divisions as much as you can, and build that pontoon bridge to the east of Capua. And on turn 1, you do this little trick that ultimately makes the mission. Attack that American infantry division in the center with your tank, flood in your SS tank divisions to finish that division off and clear the zones of control at Benevento. Use your original tank, the 26th Panzer Division, to take Benevento, and that mechanized infantry division just push it past Avellino into Salerno. Bam! 3 objectives done, and half of enemy troops are about to run out of supply. If you feel lucky, you may do a suppressive fire on Capua and then attack it from the air. And if you do get the desired suppression and don't blow the city up, you can actually kick out the town's defenders and maybe even use your remaining SS tank divisions to breach to Caserta, all on turn 1, but if you feel more cautious, send your mechanized troops to take the hexes northwest of Benevento. In either case, be very generous with rearguards even in Capua, because the AI has some very strong troops to retaliate with. In subsequent turns, it's gonna get increasingly easier to clear the area around Napoli. Make sure you leave your flying artillery to Napoli. It's a tough and constantly in supply objective, and you might get screwed by weather there. Keep that mechanized infantry unit in Salerno, but you can actually use it to scout southeast of the town, because there is a deployment hex for one of the units there. To the east of Benevento, use all of your free mechanized forces to take or block Foggia and take that supply source southeast of San Severo. Check the enemy tank division deployment locations to make your life easier, and once you block the enemy's supply, taking San Severo and Termoli is not going to be too difficult. Apennine Blitz is comfortably the easiest of the 3 Italian missions in this campaign, and contributing to that is one little trick, which as usual is the big one. Scalone Pass is the prime target for the paratrooper drop you've got, and you should absolutely go for it. The pass itself is empty, you don't need to hold that hex, and your infantry can just go south without fighting. The allies do not have any fire brigade units to deal with this, so just move your paratroopers to Belvedere, and then to Cosenza, which gives you truck supply, so you're not actually gonna lose those paratroopers. I'd advise against pushing them too far from Cosenza, but make sure you block the railway feeding all of those French and American troops. For your main force, your primary initial target is that nameless town with the enemy supply hub to the east. Focus your main attention there, and this is really a good place for you to use your flying artillery in. Because of that truck source of supply there, that hex will define how quickly you manage to push through the map. So bypass those American divisions, push through the Italian ones, and get your tanks onto the railway to Sconzano. I'd advise against trying to assault the west coast area next to Salerno. There's nothing for you to take, and the only problem with that area is that some of those troops will counterattack, including the British Armored Division. So I'd recommend blocking the railway between them and those French troops on turn 1, so that they start chewing with that supply right from the very beginning. Make sure that you have a few command points left for rear guard. As I said, those troops will counterattack, and they're plenty strong to wipe out pretty much any tank division you might have. So rear guard and no significant pushing in that area. Past turn 1, direct your main attention towards Scanzano. Obviously don't plop that reinforcement infantry in any of the initial hexes. Wait to take Scanzano and get them closer. It might also be a good idea to drop a few pontoon bridges northwest of Scanzano, because once again the town is not too well protected and you need to advance past it as soon as possible. From there on, move all of your tanks south and southwest. You're not gonna find too much resistance in places like Catanzaro and Crotone, and at this point it's much more of a matter of clearing that railway line connecting Salerno and Belvedere, moving those supply hubs to the tip of the Apennine Peninsula, bringing in your HQs, especially your 2nd SS Corps, so that you have your abilities, and just take out Reggio Calabria and Montalto. Just don't forget that Montalto is in a mountain and you will not be able to use your tanks to take it. You have that 1st Mountaineer Division specifically for that purpose, so make sure it doesn't get stuck anywhere else. If there is a single puzzly scenario in this campaign, it is certainly Unternehmen Taifun. I'm sure it permits different approaches, but I'm really happy to have found this very nifty way of tackling the scenario. And the whole premise is centered around blocking enemy supply, and as you can see, all of it is coming from Alinda and Aggia Marina. So we need to take both of them as quickly as we can. Land that Special Forces infantry in the hex between Aggia Marina and Monte Maraviglia, drop flying artillery on Aggia Marina, arena, and then drop your paratroopers in it. There's a small chance they all fail. Well, you can always restart the mission. But now the first port is ours. Use the rest of your infantry to land at Leros airfield. Feel free to soften the defenders up first. One unit should go to the hex-touching Monteclido, and the last one obviously to the hex-touching Olinda. You don't need to know why you should touch Olinda. Just do what I tell you. That's it for turn 1, and on turn 2, kick the defenders out of Monteclido and Monte Maraviglia. Your units should be plenty strong to do that, and obviously kick the defenders out of Olinda. At this point, the enemy has 0 supply, and most of the enemy units are already on their second turn without supply. And at this point, on turn 3, you only need to kick the defenders of Monteracchi out, and given the likely severe lack of supply, that task is not going to be too difficult. Salerno-Taranto may look like an abject disaster, and it kind of is, but it's incredibly fun, and you can actually win this one, despite the appearances. This mission is very much about outflanking the enemy and blocking the enemy's supply, especially in the east, and you have some of the very, hopefully strong tank divisions and other units to do this. So, initial points: set up pontoon bridges connecting your 2nd SS Corps and Bari, and another pontoon bridge connecting you to Foggia might also be a good idea. Obviously give good AT steps to the units guarding Benevento, just to slow the advance of the enemy tanks, although if by some chance you lose Benevento, you really don't need to hold it for all of the mission, so losing it is not that big of a deal. Also, don't freak if the enemy manages to connect between Benevento, Salerno and Foggia airfield. This will not block your supply significantly, but it might block theirs if you play your cards right. So on turn 1, you can use 3 units near Foggia airfield, and maybe some aerial support to force all of those units on the railway to retreat or be destroyed, and take all of the 3 hexes south of Foggia and block enemy supply in that entire area. The AI will obviously counterattack there on its turn, so give the unit defending the railway a no retreat token, and those at Foggia airfield the rear guard token. You may use your mechanized units and cavalry in the north to cross the river and force that New Zealand tank division to retreat, and on the next turn to help take Foggia. Despite the initial counterattack, these guys will fall apart very quickly without supply. And speaking of blocking supply, the area around the 2nd SS HQ is going to be, well, yet another pivot for you to break through in. Use the pontoon bridges to move your tanks in. Note that there are plenty of those Italian troops which are much weaker than the British and the Americans, but as your first priority, focus on destroying the enemy tank divisions. Those are the only units there that can really cause you trouble, and once you can do it, usually on turn 2, block the railway connecting Foggia and Bari. This will block supply to an even larger section of Italy, although your primary push should be towards that airfield and especially Taranto. The deadline for taking it is rather early, so make sure that most of your tanks actually push into that direction so that you actually have the tanks necessary to get the TAN when you need it. But once you're done with it, send someone to Brindisi and take Bari, which is the primary source of supply for the Allies in this section of the front. If you take it, and it's guarded by pretty weak Italians by the way, the rest will just fall apart. And finally, for the Salerno-Napoli area, it's very much a matter of pushing your tanks and infantry up the western coast, clear out that initial bridgehead, and for the most part, the AI will be busy trying to push towards Benevento and trying to connect with its Foggia group, meaning that you're not going to have too much difficulty outflanking Salerno and kicking its defenders out. Also, whatever reinforcements you get from the north, try to plop them at Napoli. It is very tempting not to move that entrenched infantry there, but that division plus whatever you get from the north is actually enough to take Napoli without any help from the south. So don't wait, try to take both Salerno and Napoli at the same time, and you will block what supply the Allies have in this region. From that point on, it's just gonna be a mop-up operation, and I recommend you to actually do that and destroy enemy units, triggering level ups for your HQs and choosing the 25 prestige option in the level up bonuses. You will really need that prestige in Feuerzauber. Feuerzauber marks the ending of the campaign in the north, and I believe generally it should be your last mission playing in the alternative campaign. I've personally found it to be slightly more demanding than Salerno in terms of pure firepower you need to succeed, so coming to this mission last gives you the chance to actually have lots of prestige to buy specialists and reinforcements. So let's start with the urgent task, and it's the enemy airdrop at Whaaaa. The supply hub you have there is a bit of a trick because you really don't need it there, but clearing that railway is all important because that's pretty much going to be your only railway supply connection for this mission. So use whatever you've got, including your top tanks, to destroy those paratrooper divisions. Blocking the railway, there are elites, but they're not too big, so it shouldn't be too difficult. Otherwise, in all of that salient southeast of Whaaaa, I'd advise being very cautious. Kill whatever is easy to kill just for attrition's sake, but always retreat. Trying to break through to reach Chudovo or Pogostia from the east is gonna end very badly for you. Keep retreating. And given that the eastern railway is so important, the main task of your Finnish troops there is going to be to protect it. There are a couple of places where the AI can relatively easily block it, so dig in, plug holes, and don't really expect the Finns to do anything else. Well, except around Leningrad, that is. I actually got pretty lucky in that the game plopped some of the top infantry units I actually had in the Asinovitz objective area from Nordlicht, but all in all, your position there is very good, and the enemies, as you can see, are mostly sitting in the plains, so it's mostly a matter of grinding through defending infantry and ultimately taking Leningrad with set-piece attacks. Although clearing that enemy bridgehead southeast of Leningrad is certainly a top priority. And that is because you want to keep things safe around Pogostia. That is the only other objective that you need to take, and the enemy actually will try attacking from it. So give the infantry around it, especially south of it, 80 steps, entrenchment, the works. And obviously the precision bombing theater asset you get is perfect for destroying that bridge at Pogostia. The AI will keep repairing it, but it will block enemy supply there, block the access of enemy tanks in there, and prevent the AI from breaching too far through to Chudovo and out of Pogostia in general. And once you deal with the immediate problems around Whaaaa, you should transfer most of your mechanized troops on the other side of the river and use them to attack Pogostia, and preferably clear out that entire bridgehead as well. Finally, the situation around Kingisepp. The enemy group around Oranienbaum is way too powerful for you to even think of defending against or destroying or whatever. You are supposed to scrape by here and just not let them take Kingisepp. So on turn 1, send that mechanized division straight into Kingisepp, use the nearby garbage Luftwaffe divisions to block the hexes around Kingisepp just to slow down the enemy onslaught, and as you get reinforcements in that general area, send them in and use them once again as blocking troops to just slow down the enemy advance so that you can actually survive for long enough and succeed in this mission. Good luck. And this is it for this video and for Unity of Command 2 Kursk. It has been a huge experience making it, playing it, and explaining it to you. And I wonder what Unity of Command 2 still has in store. Only time will tell. Cheers.